Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our next English breakfast. And today we have a special guest. Today we have Mariana from Portugal. And Mariana, today we are going to talk about learning English in Portugal. But also about working in international environments and a little bit about working abroad, because Mariana worked in a lot of interesting countries. And if we have time, I think it will be good if we talk a little bit about veganism and all the issues around that. So that would be also interesting. So Mariana, tell us a few words about yourself.
Hi everyone, my name is Mariana and I'm based here in Lisbon. I'm originally from here and I'm 28 years old. And for the past I had the chance to work abroad in Spain and in the Philippines, and also to travel a lot to very different countries like Jordan, India, Nepal, Korea, Japan, and kind of build my international career like this. And I'm very much looking forward to share my experience with you today.
Thank you, Mariana. I just want to point out that Mariana is only 28 and she's already done all these things. It's really amazing. So I am very, very interested in in hearing more about your travels and about things you've done. So I first would like to maybe talk about English, because this is what we're here for. So we learn English, and probably my listeners will be interested in knowing how you learned English, because you traveled a lot and you worked in international corporations and you lived abroad. So what was your journey with the language? When did you start, and how it all developed?
Mm-hmm. So in Portugal, we tend to start English classes very early in school. So I started when I was 5 years old, and my nieces, for example, they started when they were 2. So things are
Wow.
evolving in that sense. So I remember when I was 5 years old, of course, in school we only learn animals and colors and this basic stuff. And then we had English mandatory until our last year of high school. We had maybe 3 classes per week. I don't remember much the classes or how we actually learned. I don't remember us practicing or talking a lot, so I don't think those were crucial years for learning English. So then when I went to university, most of my curriculum was in English, so that helped me a lot on getting out of my comfort zone and practice more. We started having these presentations for the whole class and this kind of stuff. So that was the moment where I remember I started practicing more. And then I joined Isaac, the world's largest youth organization, and everything was in English. We traveled a lot and we were always in contact of people from very different cultures. So that was the biggest jump that I had in order to feel more comfortable speaking in English.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and when you finished school, because so you said that you don't really remember that you were talking much, right?
Yes.
So how did you end up talking in English? Like how did you have a barrier, or did you practice somewhere before?
So in school, our teachers always started the year saying, this year we are not going to speak Portuguese, we are going to speak full English for you to practice, but of
Cool.
course it never happened.
Ah, okay.
A little bit lazy. So everything was somehow in Portuguese, and then we'll put some English words. But I think I started practicing really when I went to university, when we had to do all these presentations to the whole class, and because the classes were in English. Also, we had very bad teachers when it comes to teaching us English, even if it was math or economics or whatsoever. So they're not a good example. And I think what is very good in Portugal that helped us learning English is that we don't double anything in the television. Everything is in English, all the movies. We only double the networks, the cartoons for the kids. So I think that's the biggest difference, especially when we compare to Spain. Their English level is a little bit below compared to Portugal.
Yeah.
So I think that was key, to watch everything in English with the subtitles, and then it just gets into our mind.
Yeah, that is something that all the Portuguese people always say, that it helps a lot to watch movies. You only have subtitles on TV, and just to listen to all the time. And you learn at school, of course, but then you also have it at home when you come back and you watch TV. But I also noticed, I don't know if you know this or not, but when you go outside of Lisbon, for example, you go to the north especially, people there don't really speak much English, whereas in Lisbon and in the bigger city they do. So does the education in other cities or towns differ from what you have in the bigger cities?
So I think I experienced the same when I worked in Isaac, because we had several offices across the country, and we really felt that in the north or smaller cities, the English level is very, very different compared to Lisbon or Porto. And I think it's mostly because people are not used to interact with other nationalities on a daily basis, as maybe we are here in the university. When we compare the education, universities there are fully in Portuguese. In Lisbon, they are in English. And also because of income, people in bigger cities, maybe they had more the opportunity to travel than those in the smaller cities. So yeah, it's very clear the difference, because I think these three opportunities that some have, the others don't, and that makes the difference.
Yeah, that's probably because there are lots of tourists also, right?
Yeah.
And people here really like, even I live in the suburbs of Lisbon, and even here it's not such a big problem to just go somewhere and communicate in English, and everyone speaks English, which was I must say, it was very surprising, because I knew Spain, and in Spain actually people speak less English. And then you come here and everyone, like, you have no problems at all with communicating in English.
I think we're very proud of our language here. So when we hear someone trying to speak Portuguese that is not perfect, they immediately switch to English.
Yes, that is true. My sister said, like, I am not learning Portuguese, but my sister is learning Portuguese, and she always wants to practice. And she says that you go and practice Portuguese, and then straight away they switch to English because they want to help you, but you don't want them to help you. Yeah, it's always that the thing. And do you remember how your lessons looked like at school? I mean, not in the kindergarten, but do you remember how it looked? Did you do a lot of grammar? Did you do a lot of learning vocabulary, for example?
Yeah, I think it was mostly grammar and vocabulary, and I remember exams where you just had to maybe replace a Portuguese word by an English word. So I think the education wasn't that good, in the sense that we really should have practiced much more and do more assignments and this kind of stuff. It was really the basics. I remember only doing a presentation maybe on my last year of high school, where it was the first time that I was really confronted with the situation to have to speak in English with my colleagues and this kind of stuff. So it took like 12 years to reach to that level. So I think there's lots of improvement, and the way we learn English in Portugal is by side activities, let's say, either television or having paid classes out of school and this kind of stuff.
Right, okay. So it's probably more or less like in Poland. We also have the same. That we do a lot of writing and a lot of exercises, but not speaking.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so you worked in actually, I forgot about it yesterday when I was preparing for my questions, that you actually have connections with Poland, right? You have been a lot of times, and you have family there.
Yes, I love Poland. My first time that I was there was 2011, and I've been there 5 times. My brother has been living there for maybe 15 years, and he really loves the country, and now he's proficient in Polish, which is very fun.
Great.
And I was there for the first time. For 3 weeks, I was also learning some Polish by myself. I mean, just the basic words, but I really love the language and how it sounds.
Well, it's very difficult, I think, but also I think you have in Portuguese a lot of similar sounds, so maybe it's the pronunciation is not that difficult for you.
Yeah, but it was very fun when I was in Ukraine and Czech Republic. Like, I felt okay being there in the language because of my very small knowledge of Polish, but I could connect all the dots because of the similarities, so it brought me somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And why is your brother living in Poland? Why did he decide to stay there?
He went there for Erasmus when he was in university for 6 months, and then he loved it so much that he extended his Erasmus to 1 year. And then he just said, "I want to live here." So he found his first job there, and now he has been there ever since.
Wow.
He has been to more countries or three in between, but Poland is where he wants to be. And
I think many Polish people always don't, you know, when you have, for example, Portugal with the weather and the everything, and then why would you want to move to Poland where the winter is so long and
my
so
brother
cold?
doesn't like the sun. He's very
Really?
compared to me, so yeah.
Okay, well that explains it for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I also would like to ask you about your work. So after university, because you worked in the Philippines and you worked in Spain, right?
Yeah.
So how did you decide to go to the Philippines, and how did that play out?
Okay. So when I was in university, I was a volunteer at Isaac, this youth organization. And then when I finished university, we could apply to full-time jobs. So I had 1 year in Portugal and then later 1 year in Spain. And through that same organization, I did 5 weeks volunteering in Jordan. And right after, I went to the Philippines. So I didn't go because of the country. I really knew nothing about it. I just went because of the job. It was like the job I really wanted. And Isaac facilitates these internships abroad. So I know, like, I want to do this. I want to belong to this organization. So I just went, and then when I arrived, it was a totally different world. I didn't even know they speak English as their official language. So it was a very interesting cultural shock experience throughout those months.
Yeah, and it's it's also different climate and different complete everything. But you went to Jordan before the Philippines?
Yeah. So I've been in Spain for a year. Then I went to Jordan, and then I went to the Philippines, like all in a
I see.
time in between.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so that was 3 countries with completely different cultures too.
Yes.
Wow.
Very fun. It was a crazy summer when I.
I bet. I bet. So, how did you So let's go through the countries first. So, how was working in Jordan? What kind of, for example, things were different for you, and what kinds of shocked you maybe, or were just completely something that it was hard to get used to?
So I was working with Syrian refugees because it was Ramadan, so we were together with them in the end of the day to celebrate iftar and this kind of stuff. And it was very fun because the kids didn't speak any English at all and didn't know any Arabic. So I was using my Google Translate app, like writing what I wanted, and then they would write back to me. And it was very interesting because although we didn't understand each other by language, we could really feel each other and how we were there together. And that was a very big learning in terms of language that sometimes you just don't understand, but it's still possible to communicate. And yes, that was a big shock. And then, of course, the culture. It was my first time for such a long period in a Muslim country, especially during Ramadan. Like, we couldn't drink outside, and it was very, very hot. Shore, art, kind of stuff. So yeah, it was very shocking, but at the same time, it changed my life.
Yeah, and you also really like. I think like whenever I meet you, you always talk about Jordan, and you never mention Spain. Sometimes maybe, but Spain a little bit, and the Philippines. But Jordan is like something that like, it seems like very important to you and really stuck in you. Why is that? Why do you like it? I don't know if you like it more than the other countries, but why particularly Jordan?
I liked all my experiences, and I really feel that I want to live in Spain in some years for a long period of time. But I feel in Jordan and the Philippines, the cultural shock was much bigger, and I had to get out of my comfort zone much more often, and in more difficult ways, let's say. So I remember those memories as something that really had a big impact that made me who I am today. And yes, they're very different cultures, people. So yeah, they just have a bigger impact on myself.
Okay, interesting. And so then you went to Spain?
No, I went to Spain and Jordan and Philippines.
Ah, okay, I see. Okay, so Spain was the first country that you've ever lived abroad, like from
Yes,
away from your family?
yes, the first
Okay.
time I lived alone and abroad.
Okay, and how do you remember that? Was it hard for you to be away from your country and from your family with actually a different language? Because, you know, it's still, people always, that's another thing, people always think that Spanish and Portuguese is the same, but it's totally different. So how do you remember that?
So I always loved Spain, and I had the opportunity to travel a lot with my parents when I was younger to several cities in the country. So I was very comfortable with the culture, the food, the language. I had learned Spanish before for a year, like formally. And we also say here in Portugal that we learned Spanish by watching cartoons because most of our cartoons when we were younger, they were in Spanish.
Ah, okay.
Also helped us developing that language. At first, I thought there wouldn't be many cultural shocks because the country is so close, the culture is very similar. Then, in small things, you find differences, like either in the food that you can find in the supermarkets or the attitude of people that is a little bit different. Because Spain was still recovering from the crisis and they were taking longer than Portugal. So I really felt the difference in the attitude and entrepreneurship of people, for example. That was the biggest shock that I've seen. And of English, it was a very big shock.
Yeah,
So
but you speak Spanish, right?
yeah, I speak Spanish, but I was working in an international organization, so our daily interactions were in English.
Okay. So it was hard to communicate with people there for
Yes,
you?
very hard. Even when I spoke Spanish with Portuguese accent, they wouldn't understand me, and I'm like, come on, I'm speaking your
Oh, okay. Okay.
language. Language is very hard in Spain.
Yeah, I mean, like I've always, like I think I've only been to the bigger cities, so I didn't find it that hard.
Mhm.
Although you can see that in the restaurant, maybe sometimes even in the tourist areas, it is a little bit harder.
Yeah.
And how about Philippines? Was it, how do you remember that? What was it like?
So the Philippines was very hard at first because of the weather, very humid, hot
Yes.
time, and like you're sweating all the time. And I really hated the cockroaches. There were a lot in my house, and that's also very bad. But overall, the people are like the nicest I've ever met. They're really, really, really cute and sweet, and they're always trying to please you. And then, of course, we didn't have the language barrier, so that helped a lot the experience because we speak English very fluently. Yeah, and overall, of course, it's a very difficult country because of the poverty that you see every day, and it really stuck in your mind, and you're like, what can I do to change this? We're very privileged to be here as expats, let's say. So yeah, overall, it was a very good experience, yet very challenging.
And have you ever worked in? Because I know that you worked in a company here in Portugal, but it's also an international. It was also an international company. Have you ever worked in just with Portuguese people only?
No, and I really don't want to.
Yeah, because I want to I want to ask you what would be the difference between working with only people from your own country and people from different countries? Like, what kind of things do you need to remember about or you know, like deal with every day?
So my experience when I returned back to Portugal, not with the company, but with my friends that maybe haven't traveled as much or lived abroad, is that really people first are not as well connected with or feeling this connection with world issues, and that really annoys me because I've seen many stuff when I was traveling that make me who I am today and make me caring about changing the world and this kind of stuff. And even when I worked at Embabel, was very international, but still we had a very big Portuguese team. I felt that shock as well that people have very different interests based on your international experience, and that is what I'm afraid the most, that people will be more selfish and not wanting to have this positive impact as I have.
Do you think that it depends also on the company you work with?
Definitely. Yeah.
like for example the nature of the company, so because Ambabo, which was your last company, was completely different, involved in different things, right? And how about communicating with people, for example? How do you think that is the international environment is different from your working only with people from your country?
Mm-hmm. I think communication, of course, is more clear when we are speaking in our own language. And although we were in this international environment, my team was mostly Portuguese and my bosses were Portuguese. And I actually appreciated that because it's easier for you to communicate and express yourself and your ideas.
Yeah.
Of course, when it's not in natural language, it's not that easy. So yeah, I prefer to have kind of managers that are Portuguese because we understand each other better.
Yeah. I think that's actually really a good point, right? Because if you work on projects, right, in different environments, then of course your English is fluent.
Yeah.
But still, there might be some difficulties of explaining things what you want and need to do, right? And have you ever had a situation when you actually were very nervous about expressing your own ideas, or stressed about it, or something that happened that really took you back?
I don't remember a specific moment in terms of work now, but I remember, for example, when I was in Korea during a workshop. So in the Philippines, I had a chance to travel through several countries in the region, and I was doing this workshop to Korean students, and they were really not receiving my message because their English is also not so developed. So I was really frustrated because I was feeling that I couldn't communicate clearly with them. And by the end, it was like one of the worst sessions I've ever given because of the language barrier. And I don't remember anything that much work related when I was trying to explain something to my boss, but I remember this specific moment where I had this challenge.
Yeah, this is why I'm asking you, because many even of my students, have this fear. Because quite often they haven't gone through this situation yet, but they know that probably in the future they will have that opportunity to be in an international environment or in a meeting with someone from abroad, and they are afraid that they are not going to be able to express their ideas. And this is really something really they are afraid of. And what would you have any advice for people who have this fear?
Now that you said that, I remember that, for example, when I had to communicate with American colleagues, I'll be much more nervous and my English wouldn't be so good because I was like, oh my God, they are fluent. They're going to judge me. I don't know how to speak English. So if I'm in a meeting or whatsoever with non-English speakers, but we have to communicate in English, mentally it's much easier for us to, of course, express ourselves because no one speaks better English than us, let's say. So with American colleagues, it's very different. But in terms of fears, just don't be afraid of speaking out because everyone is learning. And if you're speaking to English speakers, you have a higher probability that you know more languages than they actually do. So you are making this effort to bettering yourself. So I think be confident because you are trying something new, and maybe they are not, and you are just doing your best and trying to improve yourself.
Yeah, I love that. That is really great advice because many people forget about this, right?
Yes.
And you are making that effort. It's you who is making the effort, right?
Yeah,
and we have to. Yeah, and very often Americans or English they are jealous and they envious that we know more languages than they do. So this is something that is worth remembering about. So now you are looking for a job. And so what are your plans? Do you have any plans for your future? Do you want to go abroad? Do you want to stay in Portugal?
So I'm still in the discovery phase, trying to find out what I want to do and where I want to be. So for now, I'm looking for jobs here in Portugal, probably remote jobs to give me more flexibility and at the same time kind of work in an international culture, which I'm finding very hard to find here in Portugal because we are stuck with all these traditional companies that are not that interesting. And maybe when I'm 30, I want to go abroad again, but I don't feel like going now. I think I'm still resting from my experience.
Okay. Well, but you still have a lot of startups, I guess, in Portugal. You can still maybe, or is it not true? Is it just my?
No, we have. So I'm open to lots of opportunities. I still haven't found one yet that we match with each other.
Okay. So you are very, I think. You have a lot of how do you say? I wouldn't say beliefs, but you are a person who wants to change something in the world, right? And probably that's why you're still trying to find also a good place for yourself. So I want to ask you a little bit about what kind of things do you do to make the world a better place? I know you're vegan, so maybe you can talk a little bit about that. So let's start from things that you do every day.
So I started to be more conscious about what's happening around the world when I was at university at this organization Isaac, where we were bringing volunteers to Portugal, international volunteers to Portugal, to work on social projects, and at the same time we were sending young people abroad to work on similar projects in other countries. And then I just started to meeting people from all over the world, from the most different cultures, beliefs, and etc. So I always felt this urge to have a positive impact in the world. However, sometimes we can't do much. But I think that daily actions count. So I started to being vegan, to quit meat 4 years ago when I met this girl that she was also vegan and she was traveling the world by herself and super influencer and empowering girl. And she told me, we were in a conference in Morocco, from their organization where we had leaders from all over the world, and we were discussing strategies to transform even more young people in social makers. And she told me, you can change the world if you still eat meat. And I'm like, yeah, you are right. So in a couple of months, I made the change. I decided this is the smaller action I can do to have an impact when it comes to environment and also saving the animals. And then on my daily basis, I recycle, I save water, I try to reduce as much as possible the consumption. I decided for the past month to only buy secondhand clothes, for example, and this makes a huge difference if you're not consuming these fast fashion clothes. Also, I don't have a car, I don't intend to have kids. So I think smaller actions, if all of us kind of choose at least one that we stick, we are having a big difference, and we shouldn't believe ourselves that, oh, I'm just one, I'm not going to have an impact. Yes, we are going to have. And one experience that I always have in my mind is when I went to India in 2015. I saw so much poverty and inequalities and everything. I was very shocked, and I'm like, I need to do something to change. So I always have that in mind, that whatever I'm doing, it's impacting the world as a whole. And of course, I still want to do more in the future.
Excellent. Very. I think that's you're doing a lot. I think you're doing probably more than any one of us, and that's amazing and that's great. How about traveling and being vegan? Because I think that thing is, that part is really difficult. How do you eat? What do you eat when you travel? What do you do?
Actually, when I became vegan, that's when I started traveling alone. And I guess when you are alone, for one side, it's better because you can choose wherever to go. At the same time, I feel more conscious if I'm at some place and I ask them to take the meat or whatever out of the dish. Luckily, I'm a big fan of Middle East, so I've traveled a lot there, and the Middle Eastern food is very vegan friendly because of the hummus, the falafel. So I try as much to go to those countries, or if I'm in another city, I always have this option to go to a Middle Eastern restaurant. But nowadays, more and more countries are having these options. For example, the last trips I did was to Austria, Czech Republic, Poland, and Hungary. And I really felt it was very easy, more than in Portugal maybe, to find places. Also, if you go to Asia, they have lots of options. But yeah, my preferred region is the Middle East, so I feel very comfortable going there and eating a lot, very delicious food without having to worry, is it going to be vegan or not?
Yes, that's true. And how do you find Poland in terms of vegan food?
I think it was very good. I was very surprised with the amount of restaurants that you find, and also in the convenience stores. I'm not sure, Carrefour, like you have these 24/7 Carrefour, and I found so many stuff like yogurts and chocolates and whatever. I'm like, wow, I wish Portugal supermarkets would have the same products.
Yeah.
So surprised.
Yeah, that's true. I think Poland is getting better and better because only a few years ago, my sister is vegetarian. But only a few years ago, people were thinking that vegetarian, like if you don't eat meat, you're crazy.
Yes.
There's something wrong with you, and there were no options. People didn't know what a vegetarian was, and let alone vegan. That was just not existing in Poland. But it's changing a lot, and it's great. I think because I also like vegetarian food. So it's really
And
good.
it's very funny in some countries. When I was in Jordan or in the Philippines and outside I don't eat meat, they're like, okay, but this is chicken, take it. And I'm like,
Yeah, it's not meat, it's chicken.
there is this misunderstanding that what meat is in some countries. So we have to break that barrier.
Yes, for sure. Agnieszka here, I forgot completely to tell everyone that you can, of course, ask questions. I don't know if it's too late or not, but if you have any questions for Mariana, go ahead. And Agnieszka said that be confident is a very good advice. So when it comes to being confident in meetings and in international environment, and that you are a very positive person.
Thank you.
That's true. I think Mariana is a very positive person. If someone would like to make some changes like you do, right? So start from very small things. What would be the easiest thing to do to make, the difference in the world?
Some people say they can't, but I think quitting meat is very, very, very easy. And you're having a big impact because supposedly the meat industry is one of the most pollutants in the world. Now I don't know the word that causes more pollution.
They pollute the world. Yeah.
Yes. So I think it's very easy. At first you'll have this stereotype, oh, I love meat so much. We all loved meat before we quit it. So you have so many alternatives nowadays, and it's so much easier. There is so much delicious food out there that it won't cost a thing. For me, what was hardest was to quit shrimps because I really loved it.
Okay. Yeah.
Life goes on. And I think the small stuff is recycle, sell your car if you have, and you can ride a bike or take public transportation. I think these very small actions don't cost much, and they can have a very big impact in the future.
I think for in terms of meat also, do you find it hard to go out with your friends? Because Portuguese people love going out. And they love tashkas and little bars where you go and the only option is really meat or fish, maybe. Do you find that it's impacting your social life a little?
I don't think at all. Most of the people that I'm surrounded with, they know that I don't eat meat, so they are all, at least on those moments, they're willing to go to somewhere different and experience these new foods. Also, most people are tending to try more and more vegan or vegetarian food, and they like to say that at least once a week they went to a vegetarian place maybe, so that helps them achieve those goals.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was also never this person of tashkas or whatever, so I think
you never liked it.
no, not much. So I don't think that has impacted my social life at all.
Okay, I must say maybe the food in Tashkas are not really my favorite, but I love the
The environment.
whole in the environment and the atmosphere, and it's very Portuguese. I think it's like really, really fun to go there. Tashkas, for those who don't know, tashkas are those small bars, very simple, very small, usually very local. So it's, if you're ever in Portugal, you should go to one if you eat meat, because if you don't, then there's only soup, I guess, and salad maybe that you can eat.
The soup has meat, so.
Oh, the soup has meat. Okay, I didn't know. Well, then maybe fries. Maybe fries would be your only option. Martina is asking, how long did you study English?
So in school we studied since I was 5 till 18, so around 13 years. And only out of those 13 years, I had 1 year that I studied out of school when I was 11 years old. So yeah, overall 13 years that I had English.
No, that's not
formally.
That's like okay, I guess. Not too long, not too short. And did you pay special attention to English when you were at school? Did you realize that this is something that you need to invest your time in?
No, it was just one more subject.
Yeah, I guess quite a lot of kids have that too.
Yes.
Okay, Mariana, great stuff. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet me today, this morning, and so early. So that was great. I hope everyone enjoyed this short conversation, and that you learned a little bit, motivated yourself, but also learned some vocabulary. Because we discussed the environment and everything, and that was also great for new vocabulary. If you have more questions for Mariana, leave them in the comments, and I get Mariana to have a look at them and reply. Thank you so much, Mariana. That was really a pleasure, and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.